Hear the message from our reading in Deuteronomy today. Equity and equality are possible only when we keep the Sabbath holy, only when we rest with God. In a society where only the wealthy get to take vacation or have weekends off, we read this divine imperative in Deuteronomy that resting with God is for all persons, regardless of gender, ethnicity, or social class. It applies to humans, animals, and the earth. All are to rest in God together. Think of it. Sometimes it's hard to work with certain people. We all know who they are. We see things differently. But rest doesn't bear the same sort of challenge. I don't need someone to rest how I rest, even if I find it challenging when people work differently than I work. There's something here about rest that opens us to how very different and very similar we all are. Hold on to this. I am the Lord your God, writes the psalmist, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and said, open your mouth wide and I will fill it. There is something about this line in the Psalms that makes me think of a mother bird feeding her young. All the little birds are opening their beaks as mama bird drops food into their tiny bodies. We are like helpless baby birds before God, yet opening ourselves to the nourishment of grace, we can spread our wings and fly. Let's rehearse just this much. Resting in God is akin to opening our mouths to receive bread from heaven. We'll come back to this. In Paul's second letter to the Corinthians today, we are reminded that we are like clay jars, fragile, prone to breaking, prone to falling apart. Why? So that it is clear to us that power and goodness belong to God, not us. To live, says St. Paul, is to surrender. Why? So that Jesus might be made manifest in our flesh. I read these words and I find them to be so moving, at least at first. As I sit with them, I remember what happens to flesh when it is made manifest with Jesus. That flesh is generally found hanging on a cross. And these words are supposed to be comforting. Let's pull this thread together. Surrendering to rest opens us to become bread for the world. Now hear the words of Jesus in our gospel today. The Sabbath was made for humans, not humans for the Sabbath. God rested for the sake of humans, not because God gets sleepy. God surrenders himself over to death, not because God needs to experience what it's like to die, but to show forth, to manifest divine glory through resurrection, so that we might trust in what can only be seen with the eye of our heart, a heart that sits in silence with God. These passages held together are like fine gold thread in a princely garment that, if removed, causes the whole fabric to unravel. It's the holy thread of the gospel. Rest, open, surrender, heal. Look what he's doing, the Pharisees say. He's healing on Saturday. Let's get him. Every time I read or reflect on this encounter between Jesus and the Pharisees, I really struggle. What is it that's really going on with the Pharisees? Are they jealous that Jesus can heal on the Sabbath and they can't? Do they feel threatened that Jesus is going to draw people away from the synagogue? The Pharisees obviously feel threatened by Jesus. But what is the threat that Jesus poses? I came across something recently written by the great German thinker, writer, scientist, and philosopher Goethe. He writes that the manifestation of a phenomenon is not detached from the observer. It is caught up and entangled with his individuality. Let me put this in layman's terms. What I see when I look at another person is inseparable from what's going on in my inner world. My perception of what someone else is doing is entangled with how I live and move. It's entangled with my own heart. Mark tells us that the Pharisees and Jesus are angry with each other. The Pharisees are angry with Jesus because, well, he does things he's not supposed to do. Anger, as I was recently reminded, is unmet expectation. The Pharisees are angry with Jesus because he does not do what they expect a teacher of Israel to do. Jesus is angry, says Mark, because the Pharisees' hard hearts grieve him. The inner world of the Pharisees is fear and anxiety, leading them to feel threatened by Jesus and then seek his demise. The inner world of Jesus is compassion for those who need healing, leading him to grieve the hearts of those that are hardened by irreverent attention to Sabbath restrictions, which becomes a catalyst for healing. In their anger, the Pharisees storm off and plot to kill Jesus. What does Jesus do with his anger? He heals the man with the withered hand. It is not to be overlooked that the Pharisees condemned Jesus for healing, for working on the Sabbath, but apparently plotting to kill a man is not considered work. I guess if you love what you do, as the saying goes. It should be noted here that there's no actual law against healing on the Sabbath. The accusation against Jesus misconstrues his actions as work. Listen to where this holy thread leads, revealed with great clarity in the encounter between Jesus and the Pharisees. What we do with our rest can entrain our hearts toward wholeness and healing or hardness and hate. The Pharisees, misrepresenting Jesus' healing as work, fail to recognize that keeping the Sabbath holy is about restoring the body to God. It is about sustaining the deep connection between soul and body, which are so easily severed in a world of constant commerce and consumption. Jesus keeps the Sabbath holy by healing, for healing is what Sabbath is all about. The Pharisees, however, only see a lawbreaker because their hearts are hard with hate. Our scriptures today invite us to ask ourselves very important questions. What am I doing with my rest? What is the food to which I am open? To what do I need to surrender? What are the unmet expectations hardening my heart to healing within? Now, I know it's summer and we're supposed to be taking it easy, but our Gospels invite us for something more. Jesus' invitation to keep the Sabbath holy is an invitation to notice what needs healing within us and among us, and to seek this healing in ourselves for the sake of healing in our communities. Just imagine what the upcoming political cycle in our country could look like if we all attended to what needs healing within, rather than what needs to get worked out in somebody else. Imagine what sort of transformation might happen in our communities if our anger was harnessed for healing the lame instead of tearing each other apart. Imagine what might happen if we really did rest from commerce and complaint, even for a single day each week, realigning our souls and bodies to the way of love with deepening intention. I suspect that 52 days a year would become 100, and 100 2, and 2 become 3, and soon we would begin to experience the holiness of God each and every day. Now, I know this sounds idealistic, but Jesus really isn't into half measures, and nor should we. The Christian life, as G.K. Chesterton reminds, has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. And as we read in the cloud of unknowing, in the trying is the desire. As we try to rest, try to open, try to surrender, try to heal, the desire, the longing for each increases as restfulness in our hearts, openness to each other, surrender to love and forgiveness gives way to healing within and in the world. Perhaps all we really have to do with these clay jars that we are is try, knowing, trusting that healing belongs to God. Rest, open, surrender, heal. Amen.